他来自拥有深厚歌唱传统的波罗的海小国。
Great tradition of singing, which is in the blood of Latvians.
他曾立志成为一个技艺精湛的小号手。
Practiced like a mad. 8 hours a day. My lips were bleeding. But practicing.
最终，他找到了属于自己的音乐表达方式。
I became very free. I didn't care how do I look. I was just thinking of music.
本期可凡倾听为您带来指挥家安德里斯·尼尔森斯专访。刚刚过去的2017年，对于来自拉脱维亚的指挥天才安德里斯·尼尔森斯来说，肯定是充满了收获和凯旋的一年。据专业古典音乐媒体的数据统计，尼尔森斯在过去这一年里，总共指挥了79场音乐会，占据世界最繁忙指挥家排行榜的第2名，仅比与他年龄相近的劲敌雅尼克·涅杰瑟贡少一场。作为波士顿交响乐团的音乐总监，他与乐团合作的肖斯塔科维奇交响曲系列专辑连续第2年将格莱美大奖收入囊中。2017-18月季开始后，尼尔森斯又走马上任，正式成为了历史悠久的莱比锡布商大厦管弦乐团的第21任音乐总监。他与乐团共同录制的布鲁克纳第3交响曲，又收获了权威的荷兰爱迪生古典唱片大奖。2017年10月，尼尔森斯率领维也纳爱乐乐团造访中国。本期可凡倾听，让我们走进这位炙手可热的年轻大师。
Hello, Andres.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice
it's
to meet you.
It's my pleasure to have an opportunity to interview you.
Oh,
I heard
pleasure.
this is the first time for you to come to China. So
Yes.
what do you expect the audience in China respond to your performance with Vienna Philharmonic?
Yes, it is the first. This is true. It's the first time in China, and I'm really excited. But I was really even more excited when I came here because the audience. I mean, it was so enthusiastic in all concerts, and you can see so many young people, really young, college or even younger, and listening to these wonderful pieces, and also not so easy pieces like Richard Strauss or Richard Wagner. It was such a great feeling to see so many young people, and to see that they're really listening very carefully, and there's a lot of moments where there's a silence in music, and it was really silent, and I was really surprised and very happy, because I think the future is, of course, in our children, and the future is in education, and when you see young people interested in such a thing as a classical music and such a great value, you have a great hope that there is a great future, and this had a feeling. What the first great feeling I experienced it is like this has a great future, and this is a fantastic country, and I'm absolutely sure there is really, as everyone says, it's a great future and present as well.
There are so many musicians and composers in your country, like Janssens, your teacher,
yeah,
and Maskey and Vasquez, something like
God,
that.
You know.
Yeah.
That's
So,
impressive.
what is about the Latvia that produces such a talent?
Yeah, it's actually Latvia in total is only 2 million inhabitants in Latvia. It's small country, of course, but I would say two things probably. One is that there is a very strong tradition of singing, of almost everyone sings in a choir, or that we have this song festival when everyone, about 30,000 people sing outside, but very difficult songs with 4 voices and so almost everyone is singing, and therefore many people go, particularly when it was in Soviet times, go to music school and to study an instrument, and not necessarily to become a professional, but just for fun and so sport and music was very important thing. And I think that from one side, this great discipline of education, what was in my generation and also generations earlier, plus the mentality, I think Latvian mentality, which is somewhere between Scandinavian and Russian, I think that mixture somehow makes, I know Latvians, we are very, I would say, hard working, we like to work hard, and we also quite self-critical, which is, I think, which is a helpful thing when you want to develop, because if you think that you can now have reached something and you can stop, develop and study, it's not a good thing. It's better you have a constant feeling that you want to find new things and to develop and to, in my case, when I conduct, to look in the score and to always find the new colors, the new things to. So I think that all came from my education, and I think all of, as you mentioned, these wonderful musicians from Latvia, I think they very often they say the same things, that education, Latvian mentality, which is hardworking, and the great tradition of singing, which is in the blood of Latvians.
1978年，尼尔森斯出生于拉脱维亚首都里加的一个音乐世家，父亲是大提琴手和合唱指挥，而母亲更是创立了当地最早的以演唱文艺复兴时期歌唱作品为主的专业合唱团。5岁时，尼尔森斯被家里人带到里加的拉脱维亚国家歌剧院，聆听了唐豪瑟的演出。瓦格纳的魔力迅速征服了尼尔森斯，让他下定决心以音乐作为毕生的追求。
As we know, you come from a music family. Did it help push you into the music at the early stage in your life?
I was in love with music. Of course, my parents are musicians, so I was in love with music since I was born. But I really loved music, and I loved also piano. But I think as a boy, I was really thinking about that. I mean, I wanted to become a football player, for soccer player. There's one period, but now I'm so thankful to my parents that they didn't force me, but they always reminded me. And of course, I was studying it still very seriously. But then I decided at the age of 11, suddenly I want to play another instrument, and it came out that I had a chance to play trumpet, and I started to study trumpet and practiced like a mad. 8 hours a day, my lips were bleeding, but practicing, and it was a very quick result. And so I became a trumpet player. And then started to study conducting and singing, and everything went together. And at the end, it all ended. So I became a conductor, and I loved music, of course, because the first exposure, when I was 5 years old, my father took me to the opera house in Riga, which is a nice opera house, and the first opera I heard was Tannhäuser, Richard Wagner. I was 5 years old, and normally people would maybe listen Wagner when they're 17, maybe 20, but at the age of 5 it's very unusual. But I loved that opera so much that I was in love in that music, and since then I can say I was infected by music from age of 5, absolutely. So even if I didn't become a pianist, but I knew I was going to be a musician from that age.
So as a 5-year older boy, what did you take away from this performance?
I think firstly, of course, it is the music itself, because I enjoyed, and I still, of course, I'm now all the tunes, or many of these tunes which were so. Not only so beautiful, but the way of Wagner's writing, this endless melody and endless it felt I was hypnotized by that music, and that was the biggest thing. And of course, the story in Tannhäuser, you know, the idea of sacrificing for someone you love was very strong, you know. And I was crying because Tannhäuser died, and then Elizabeth died, and you know, I was crying because I was so sorry that they died. The atmosphere, the opera, everyone is dressed, and then the lights go down, and you have expectations, and then and comes the conductor and applause, and then and the conductor started to conduct, and I, as a 5-year-old child, I was thinking, oh my God, he's doing something, and the music is sounding. So I subconsciously thought I would want to be involved in music like he. I was, you know, of course, in 5 years you don't understand what exactly it means. I think he was, you know, like painting, like, and from that moment I wanted to become conductor very subconsciously, age of 5, and now I still think this the same. I think the conductor profession is not only giving the tempo and giving the dynamic, but it is with your hands also showing the character and creating the atmosphere of what the music is about, and what in subjective opinion, but it's like, you know, I think it's from that time it was the first impulse to become a conductor. Yeah.
So you must be very sensitive to music.
Well, I mean, I love music very much. I think I'm quite sensitive, which sometimes is, you know, I cry quite a lot because when I hear beautiful music.
When did you realize the music will be your career?
I think when I really realized is when I started to play trumpet, because I practiced so much, and the result was quite fast. And then I entered the music high school, and then I got my first job very early, age of 17, in the opera in Riga, the same opera where I heard Tannhäuser, and I got my job when I was 17, and then I played for 5 years in the opera orchestra, but then parallelly I was studying conducting. Then I became music director of the same orchestra I was playing opera. So it's a very symbolic journey somehow, I think, for me. And
do you think it is very important for a conductor to have played an instrument?
I think it's like in any profession. If you are responsible of a bigger company or something, and if you before that, if you have experience at working yourself, I think you know much more about how these people feel and how you can improve things.
So were you nervous when you first come to the stage and the conductor or the orchestra?
Of course I felt nervous, but I felt that in front of the orchestra and conducting, I can express myself as a musician much better as through singing or trumpet.
尼尔森斯从小就接受来自家中的音乐熏陶，除了钢琴，他还跟随母亲学习演唱文艺复兴时期的意大利语和英语牧歌。从12岁起，他开始学习小号，逐渐走上专业道路，从学生乐团一直晋升到拉脱维亚国家歌剧院。但在意识到自己具有天赋的指挥才能之后，尼尔森斯便将专注力完全投入到指挥领域当中。
As we know, you have a great variety of talent in music. First of all, you have a very nice voice of bass and a baritone.
I used to study, but not
with
anymore.
which you had floated some early stage music, like Italian madrigal. What did you learn? What did you find from these Renaissance and the Baroque composition?
Actually, the first music I was singing, and actually my mother was the first who in Latvia, in that time in Soviet Latvia, who founded the early music group, which sang Renaissance Baroque music. And I of course, as a kid, listened to that and then later sang. I think it's very interesting. Sometimes people think, okay, music starts with Mozart, and then music starts much before. And it's so interesting to see. And I think it's very, very amazing what colors the Renaissance music, whether it's Monteverdi or the Gesualdo or it's Italian or English madrigals, and there is so much interesting harmonies inside. As you can see that the composers like Mozart or Beethoven, they were influenced from the music before, and obviously again the Renaissance music was influenced from the medieval so there's always a tradition and continuity, and of course Bach's music, to sing Bach was really very special. To listen in organ concerts, you just listen and like meditative, so I remember all this very well, and I had the great pleasure to sing it as well later on.
So as you talk about it, you study singing very seriously, but why did you stop the vocal training later?
And I worked as a trumpet player professionally. I was singing quite a lot, and I started to conduct some concerts as well. And I thought I would continue all three, but of course, then I came to the point I realized I have to choose between these things to go one way further. And it became that I chose conducting, because I think both singing and playing in the orchestra myself, it hugely helps conducting, because it helps to understand in a way, to me, how the orchestra musician feels in the orchestra. Music is a sensitive, beautiful art. You can influence, of course, but I think through trust, through encouragement and giving energy, and then that's I think, and creating the atmosphere, and that's the task of conductor. So I chose to become a conductor after all.
I heard there is a story about the Glazunov. One day he would like to conduct his own work with an English orchestra, but the horn player stood up and said he could not play a certain note because it is impossible. Of course, everybody knows it was false chord, but the whole member of the orchestra were laughing at the composer. So do you think it is very important for a conductor to have played an instrument?
For me, it hugely helps. And I think orchestras, if they know that you actually have played an instrument and you have played in the orchestra, they somehow trust you more. And then when you conduct, you understand that it's so much to do with psychology, of encouraging, and sometimes to be, of course, the discipline is a very important part, but it is encouraging and trusting as well. So if the orchestra musician feels that the conductor doesn't trust, wants to rehearse everything and don't give a chance to play individuality, it's musicians feel very, very scared, and it can't be a good result. So I think it's like in any profession, if you are responsible of a bigger company or something, and if you have experience at working yourself, I think you know much more about how these people feel and how you can improve things. So I think the same with conducting.
What was your first experience as a conductor? So were you nervous when you first come to the stage and the conductor or the orchestra?
I was studying obviously in a music high school. I was studying trumpet, and there was orchestra, student orchestra, and I was playing in the orchestra, and the conductor, who actually was my first teacher, he got sick or he didn't come, and then suddenly somebody told us that he's not coming, and I stood up and said, well, you know, I'm studying with him, and I'm just studying this. It was Beethoven First and Second Symphony, and I told, you know, well, let's rehearse. Let's just play, and that was the first time. And I felt, of course, I felt nervous, but I felt that in front of the orchestra and conducting, I can express myself as a musician much better as through singing or trumpet. Even though I could play trumpet okay and singing, or, you know, but at that point I felt I'm not anymore shy. I became very free, I didn't care how do I look, I was just thinking of music. And from that moment, and I was 17 years old, I realized, yes, I want really to become a conductor. Is the first impulse where you can say, oh yes, you should continue, is when you are in front of the orchestra, because you see how you react, how your body reacts, because there are suddenly some brave people who become so scared that they start to shake, or they don't know what to say, or opposite. I was surprised because I'm a shy person, and suddenly as if composer would be telling me something, you know. I felt very comfortable. I was very excited, and yeah, so that was the first time I knew I want really to really concentrate on studying conducting very seriously.